All right, so get this. 28 times.
Wow.
That's how many times Kami Rita Sherpa has summited Mount Everest.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
It's a world record, and it begs the question, what drives someone to push themselves to that limit? We're going to deep dive into the life of this remarkable man, the Everest Man, through a fascinating biographical documentary you shared with us.
Yeah, it's interesting you ask about his drive because the documentary doesn't just focus on like his physical accomplishments, you know?
Right.
It really gets into his motivations, his connection to the Sherpa community, and just the culture of mountaineering itself.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning.
Yeah.
He grew up in the village of Tem, right in the shadow of Everest.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even imagine what it must be like to grow up with that view every day.
Well, the documentary paints a picture of a life that's far from easy. Tem is beautiful, yes.
Yeah.
But it's also a place of harsh conditions.
I bet.
And the people there rely heavily on each other.
Mm-hmm.
Family and community are paramount.
Yeah.
And of course, for the Sherpa people, the mountains are more than just a backdrop.
Right.
They're deeply intertwined with their spiritual beliefs.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so their beliefs are rooted in Tibetan Buddhism.
Okay.
And they see the mountains as deities, powerful forces to be respected.
Oh, wow.
So for someone like Kami Rita climbing, Everest isn't just a physical challenge, you know? It's a spiritual journey as well.
That adds a whole other dimension to his accomplishments.
Yeah, definitely.
And his father was a mountain guide.
Yes.
Right. So it sounds like he was practically born into this world.
Yeah, mountaineering is part of his heritage passed down through generations.
Wow.
In fact, the documentary mentions that Kami Rita started working as a porter at just 12 years old.
12 years old.
Yeah.
I could barely handle a grocery bag at that age, let alone hauling gear up a mountain.
Right.
I mean, did he even have a choice at that point, or was it just expected of him?
It's hard to say for certain,
Yeah.
but the film does highlight that for many Sherpa families, mountaineering is a way of life, a means of supporting themselves and their communities.
Right.
It's not just a job, you know?
Right.
It's ingrained in their culture.
So he starts out as a porter, carrying supplies for other climbers.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point makes the transition to actually climbing himself.
Yes. And the documentary does a good job of showing that it's not an easy transition.
Right.
He joined his first Everest expedition at 24.
Wow.
Working as a high-altitude worker before ever attempting to summit.
Okay, hold on. What does that even entail?
Yeah.
What's a high-altitude worker?
They're the unsung heroes of these expeditions.
Okay.
Setting up camps, carrying supplies, often facing the most dangerous conditions.
Really?
Yeah, think of them as the Sherpas who make it possible for everyone else to even attempt the climb.
I see. So they're facing the same risks,
Right.
but without the glory of reaching the summit.
Exactly.
Wow.
And the documentary doesn't shy away from the dangers. It gives you a real sense of what they go through.
Yeah.
For example, there's a whole section on the Khumbu icefall.
Oh, yeah.
This massive glacier that's constantly shifting with crevasses that could swallow you whole.
Just hearing that makes me shiver.
Oh, yeah, it's terrifying.
And Kami Rita was known for navigating this treacherous icefall with expertise, even in his early days, right?
Yes. The documentary highlights his calmness under pressure, his ability to assess risk and make quick decisions in those high-stakes situations.
Yeah.
Even back then, it was clear he had a special talent for mountaineering.
So how does this calm, skilled, high-altitude worker make the leap to becoming the Everest Man?
Right.
What sparked that ambition?
Well, his first summit was in 1994.
Okay.
And honestly, it seems that moment was a turning point for him. It's like something clicked and he realized he could not only survive Everest,
Yeah.
but conquer it again and again.
Wow. It's fascinating how that first summit can ignite a passion, you know, in some climbers.
Yeah.
You hear stories of people who reach the top and vow never to do it again.
Right.
And then others like Kami Rita who are just drawn back again and again.
It's almost like Everest reveals something within them.
Yeah.
A strength they didn't know they had a connection to the mountain itself.
And you mentioned earlier that he's not doing it just for personal glory.
Right.
He sees it as honoring the Sherpa people and their culture.
Absolutely. The documentary spends a good deal of time on that aspect of his story.
Okay.
He talks about how he wants to show the world the strength and resilience of the Sherpas and how they've played such a vital role in the history of mountaineering.
It's true. Their contributions are often overlooked.
Yeah.
We tend to focus on the Western climbers who reach the summit,
Mm-hmm.
but without the Sherpas, many of those expeditions wouldn't even be possible.
Exactly. They are the ones who know the mountain best, who navigate the treacherous routes, who carry the heavy loads, and who ensure the safety of everyone involved.
And Kami Rita has been a vocal advocate for Sherpa rights and safety, hasn't he?
Yes, he's been very outspoken about the need for better compensation for Sherpas, as well as improved safety measures on the mountain.
What specific changes has he been pushing for?
He's been advocating for things like mandatory insurance for Sherpas, better training and equipment, and stricter regulations for expedition companies.
Okay.
He's also been working to raise awareness about the dangers they face and the importance of their role in mountaineering.
It sounds like he's not afraid to challenge the status quo, even if it means going up against powerful interests.
He's definitely not afraid to speak his mind.
Yeah.
He's even criticized the Nepali government for not doing enough to protect Sherpas and for focusing too much on the commercial aspects of Everest.
It's easy to see why he's such a respected figure within the Sherpa community.
Yeah,
He's not just a record-breaking climber.
right.
He's a leader who's fighting for their rights and recognition.
And he's doing it all while remaining incredibly humble and grounded.
That really comes across in the documentary, doesn't it?
Yes, there's a scene where he's back in his village, and he's just interacting with the locals, helping out with everyday tasks.
Oh.
And you can see that he hasn't let his fame or accomplishments go to his head.
It's refreshing to see that level of humility in someone who's achieved so much.
And it speaks to his deep connection to his roots, to his community, and to the traditions that have shaped him.
Okay, so we've talked about his record-breaking climbs, his advocacy work, his humility, and his deep connection to his heritage.
Mm-hmm.
What else does the documentary reveal about his motivations for continuing to climb Everest?
Yeah.
What keeps him coming back after all these years?
Well, one interesting aspect that the documentary explores is his relationship with his family
Okay.
and how they've influenced his choices.
I'm curious to hear about that.
Yeah.
I mean, it must be incredibly stressful for his family, knowing he's putting his life on the line every time he goes up there.
You're right. And the documentary doesn't shy away from that tension.
Right.
His wife, in particular, expresses her worries and concerns. But at the same time, she understands his deep passion for the mountains and the sense of purpose it gives him.
It sounds like she's his source of support through all the challenges.
Exactly. And he talks about how he draws strength from his family, how their love and support are what motivate him to keep pushing his limits.
It's a reminder that even the most daring individuals rely on the love and support of those closest to them.
Absolutely. And in a way, his family becomes a metaphor for the Sherpa community as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
They are his support system, his source of strength, and the reason he keeps climbing.
It's amazing how this documentary reveals these layers to his personality and motivations. You know, he's not just a one-dimensional figure.
Right.
He's a husband, a father, a community leader,
Yeah.
and someone who's carrying the weight of a whole culture on his shoulders.
You hit the nail on the head. It's that complexity that makes his story so compelling. But the documentary also doesn't shy away from the darker side of Everest,
Right.
the challenges and controversies that surround it.
You're right. We've been focusing on Kami Rita's personal journey.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't ignore the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
What are some of the specific issues that the documentary highlights?
Well, for one, there's the impact of climate change on the mountain itself.
Okay.
They show some pretty stark footage of melting glaciers, increasing rockfall, and changing weather patterns.
That's something I've been reading about, how climate change is making Everest even more dangerous than it already is.
Exactly. And the documentary interviews several climbers and experts who talk about how these changes are affecting everything from route finding to the safety of base camp itself.
And it's got to be even more challenging for the Sherpas who are up there working season after season.
Absolutely. They're the ones who are most directly impacted by these changes, and they're having to adapt their techniques and knowledge to navigate the new risks.
I imagine it's also raising questions about the long-term sustainability of climbing Everest.
Yeah.
I mean, if the mountain is becoming increasingly dangerous,
Hmm.
at what point does it become irresponsible to keep sending people up there?
That's a huge ethical dilemma that the documentary grapples with. Yeah.
They interview people on both sides of the argument.
Yeah.
Those who believe that climbing should continue as long as it's possible,
Right.
and those who think it's time to start limiting the number of expeditions or even closing the mountain altogether.
It's a tough call, and I don't envy anyone having to make that decision.
And it's not just about safety either. The documentary also delves into the issue of overcrowding on Everest
Okay.
and how the sheer number of climbers attempting the summit each year is contributing to the problem.
I've seen those photos of lines of people waiting to reach the summit.
Oh, yeah.
It looks more like a traffic jam than a wilderness experience.
And those delays can be deadly at that altitude.
Oh, wow.
People are running low on oxygen, they're getting exhausted, and the longer they're exposed to the elements, the higher the risk of frostbite, altitude sickness, or even death.
It's a stark contrast to the image we often have of the solitary climber pushing their limits in the face of nature's grandeur. Right. And the documentary makes the point that this commercialization of Everest is taking away from its mystique and even devaluing the accomplishments of those who do reach the summit.
That's a fascinating point. If everyone's doing it, does it diminish the achievement in some way?
It's a question that the documentary leaves open for the viewer to ponder.
Yeah.
And it's a question that Kami Rita himself has had to confront.
I'm curious, how does he address these criticisms?
Well, he acknowledges the concerns about overcrowding and the impact it's having on the mountain, but he also defends the routes of the Sherpas to earn a living from guiding and supporting these expeditions.
It's a complex issue and there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
But it's good that he's at least engaging in the debate, not shying away from the tough questions.
Exactly. And he also points out that climbing Everest, even with all its challenges and controversies, can be a transformative experience for those who undertake it.
He talks about how it tests your limits, both physically and mentally, and how it forces you to confront your fears and push yourself beyond what you thought was possible.
And he emphasizes the importance of doing it with respect for the mountain, for the culture, and for the Sherpa people who make it all possible.
So, even in the face of these challenges, he still believes that climbing Everest has value both for the individual and for the broader community.
Yes, and he sees it as a way of honoring the Sherpa tradition of mountaineering, a tradition that he's carrying forward for future generations.
Well, I'd say this deep dive has been eye-opening.
Yeah.
I went in thinking this would just be a story about a guy who climbs mountains.
Right.
But it's so much more than that.
It's a story about human ambition, resilience, cultural identity, and the ethical dilemmas we face in our pursuit of adventure and our relationship with the natural world.
It's made me think about my own definitions of success and what it means to truly push your limits both physically and mentally. And it's certainly given me a whole new appreciation for the Sherpa people and their remarkable culture.
I think that's a great takeaway. Kami Rita's story is a reminder that even the most extraordinary feats are often rooted in something much deeper. A connection to community, a respect for tradition, and a willingness to confront the challenges that life throws at you.
Beautifully put. So to all our listeners out there, we encourage you to seek out this documentary and experience Kami Rita's story for yourselves. It's a journey that will stay with you long after the credits roll.
And perhaps it will inspire you to find your own mountains to climb whatever form they may take.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing your own boundaries.